want to talk about the way that things continue to disintegrate during spiritual awakening. And they disintegrate in different ways for different people. My experience has been very much in terms of the domestic financial uh, logistical structures of my life. For some reason, this being has a lot of karmic patterning around that. And so much of my path has been learning to release uh, the ideals of what home, family, success should look like. And I don't think that this is uncommon for people in spiritual awakening, but for other folks, it might look like really different kind of samskaras or karmic patterns that they're working with, because I know folks who are in this process who have very stable home environments, very stable kind of logistical, financial, domestic structures, but then they're working with a lot more sort of internal content, or they've got a lot more attachment to sort through inside. And if you're going through this, do know that I don't want to say it gets easier, because in some ways it really doesn't. The actual disintegration process doesn't necessarily abate, but that your comfort and your well-being through the dissolution of ego structures does become much more capacitated. You become much more easeful in the way that you welcome and release occurrences in life. And the dissolution or the disintegration of these structures start to become more refined, in the spiral patterning of this world that we live in. When you first encounter that that thing that falls apart, it might be in a really dramatic, intense way, and then over time it gets subtler and subtler and subtler, so that there's perhaps a lot less drama involved in its unfolding. I think it can be really helpful to get used to this welcoming gesture and this release gesture. Because our tendency as egoic beings is to really hold on tightly. And when we want to release something, our tendency is to push it away. And this sort of rush represents a discomfort with the threshold, with the liminal space in between. And I think that this is where the whole awakening process can become so much more easeful, to be able to sit in the liminal space and not be rushing to receive or rushing to release. That it's actually allowing things to take their natural time. So you're watching it, watching that ego dissolution or the structure of your life that isn't quite aligned with being, do its organic decay. So nature is such a good teacher for this. And really, we are nature. This is one of the things that our society has forgotten, and perhaps one of the purposes of awakening, if we were to like put concepts around it, which can be useful, but we also need to discard and release when they're no longer helpful. But one useful concept is to consider awakening a coming back into nature as who we are. And that represents both the ultimate nature of the great one being from which all of this arises, but on a relative level, it also represents having a harmonious relationship with the actual nature that exists around us, because it is us. We're made of the same stuff and we arise from the same consciousness. And so we start to remember these things, and we start to reconnect with the patterns in our own body beings that mimic, well, it's not mimic, that are the cycles of nature. Decay, composting, all of that disintegrative energy, and then the growth that emerges from that can't actually exist without that. And I think this is where we see the imbalance of society in its unawakened state, the desire of neocolonial industrialized capitalism to be only oriented around growth and not willing to look at the decay or the death, not willing to entropy in order to maintain balance. And so when we start our spiritual awakening process, however that begins for you, having a willingness toward entropy, toward the reduction of things in your life, which is different to asceticism. It's different to, burning it all down, so to speak. You don't need to discard of anything that isn't naturally falling away. Because when we get into the human-willed detachment as opposed to non-attachment, when we force being unattached to things, those things are likely just to re-arise in different ways with an even stronger level of attachment. So quite often when we're cultivating unknowingly a spiritual ego, we do go through this process of willingly detaching, which I've certainly been through many times in my life, that the longing for beingness, for truth, caused the human ego to mistake itself as being able to make that happen. And so, getting rid of things, people, situations, jobs prematurely isn't uncommon. And it's also, not a terrible thing, because ultimately everything is reorienting us towards being. So there's no helpfulness in self-judgment or berating ourselves about what has occurred. It's just going forward with a clearer seeing and tuning into what is natural. I think natural is a really good indicator for making decisions during awakening. I'm going to deal with making decisions in a separate video, because I think that that's actually a really important topic. But suffice it to say in this moment that quite often the way that we've been taught to make decisions is not a very natural way. And so we need to reorient our discernment to be able to sit in this liminal space and to be really aware of the human will and its tendency towards pushing and pulling, and be with the discomfort of that urge in order to give space and time for things to unfold more easily. And this also tends to reduce a lot of the painful impacts of the awakening process as well. That if we do too much of this like pushing and pulling in our rush to get to some ideal place, which is not really the point of the journey, we can certainly cause a great deal of pain and suffering for ourselves and for others. So the falling apart is normal. It's not comfortable. And there isn't any way to make it comfortable. I think that this is another kind of pitfall or way in which we get trapped in cycles during an awakening process, is the urge in us to somehow transform our mindset or our approach or our view of what's happening to diffuse the discomfort that comes up with this disintegration. But actually, discomfort is a part of the nature of that disintegration. And so I would suggest not trying to become okay with what is happening, but to really just be with the natural response in your body being to that disintegration. So if you feel grief at losing someone or something or some situation, then feel grief. You know, don't go into this transcendental, like, I am only awareness and this object of consciousness is unfolding. And yes, and you know, we hold the space of awareness in its truth, and then we also hold the truth of the humanity and the humanness and the arising of our emotions and our responses. We honor and acknowledge those in equal measure. And it's actually the capacity to be in this paradoxical space of both deeply human felt loss, you know, whatever it is that you're feeling, at the same time as knowing our true self, our open beingness, our pure awareness. To hold both of them simultaneously is, in my sense, true non-duality, as opposed to a non-duality which will only identify with the field of awareness and which disidentifies with all of the human content. And so that human content, you know, is being detached in a spiritually egoic way, because we're trying to transcend the experience of who we really are, and who we really are is beingness in a human body. We're a concentration or a distillation of that pure field. And so we can't deny the diversity of form and our embodiment in that diversity of form. So give honor and acknowledgement to whatever is coming up. You know, don't just detach or dissociate from it through spiritual tools, because they are ultimately just tools. You know, the non-dual awareness, when it's really touched, you know, when I'm able to really contact that in its fullness, I experience it to be much more inclusive than some of the the vehicles that we use in order to move towards that state. And this transcendental way of kind of detaching from the human experience is one of those vehicles. But at some point, we need to step out of the vehicle because we're needing to take a different type of means to get where we're going at that point. And when it comes to the release of what's dissolving, what's disintegrating, what's falling apart, quite often the vehicle is to move really deeply into the felt experience of it, not to amplify that felt experience, not to feed it, but to be present with it, to hold it, to offer it love, unconditional, compassionate love. I've felt this lately with, some of the experiences that have been coming up in me around ego disintegration, even linked with making these videos, right? Is that there's always that tendency to want to be one step ahead of where we really are. And then when we see that part that's just trying to like latch on or to pull in something a little prematurely, or to resist releasing, or to push away, it can be quite confronting. And the sensations in the body, the pure experience of that emotion, if we can be with that, it does its own dissolution. It has its own dissolution process. And then through that dissolution, the clear seeing is able to come through a lot more strongly. And so for me, my practice at the moment, when I feel these energies rise up of clinging or pushing away, is really just to stop, to give it space, to be quiet. I wouldn't even call what I do meditation, because meditation tends to have this idea in our society of like, you sit down on a cushion and then you're doing some sort of a technique, or if you're not doing a technique, then you're not thinking, you're like in pure awareness. But what I'm talking about is on a very practical level, day to day, whenever the clinging, the grasping, or the pushing away arises, to just pause. And if we can't pause in the immediate moment, if there's responsibilities, to see if you can find a sense of spaciousness within yourself while your body is going about its tasks, to not suppress, but if you can't express, to simply be aware of, and to have that feeling of compassionate love for what it is that's rising up. It's really very, very simple. It's just not easy sometimes. Quite often the practices which are most beneficial for an awakening process are not practices that have any complicated, ritualized, special thing to them. They're just even using our human heart as a response to our human experience. I'm going to leave it there for today. If you are enjoying these videos, please like, subscribe, comment. It helps them get out to other people that might enjoy them. And I look forward to seeing you next time.